My name is Elena Harper. I am 39 years old. When my husband stood up during his mother's milestone anniversary toast and calmly declared he was ending our 15-year marriage while claiming every asset we had built together, the betrayal hit me like a physical blow, leaving me struggling to breathe amid the stunned family silence. He announced the divorce and that the house cars and business would remain his. My mother-in-law nodded in agreement as my son stared in shock. I didn't cry or argue. Instead, I slowly stood, smiled politely, and excused myself to the powder room with quiet dignity. But that walk away was the moment I decided their underestimation would become their undoing. If you've ever felt your own family erase you right in front of everyone who matters, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read every single one. And it really means the world to know I'm not alone in this. Let me take you back so you understand exactly how we got to that awful anniversary celebration at the country club in Naperville. I met my husband when I was barely 18 and working as a legal assistant at a small firm downtown. He was 25, charming, and full of big dreams about building a real estate empire in the Chicago suburbs. I was practical, organized, and good at keeping my mouth shut while my eyes stayed wide open. We married fast, and Logan came along when I was 20. I kept working part-time while raising our son, always listening to my late grandmother's voice in my head that a woman should always have something of her own. When the business finally took off at 23, my husband asked me to quit and handle everything behind the scenes. I became the unpaid bookkeeper, office manager, client coordinator, and basically the glue that held the whole operation together while raising Logan and keeping our household running smoothly. For 11 years, I poured myself into that company, and for 11 years, he took all the credit at every industry dinner and award night. Everyone saw the successful developer, but no one saw the woman who made sure the books balanced and the clients stayed happy. Somewhere along the way, the late nights started, the criticism crept in, and the decisions happened without me. Then came that public announcement at his mother's milestone celebration with the whole family nodding along like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. What none of them knew was that 3 years earlier, I had stumbled onto something buried deep in the company records during one of those late-night reconciliations. Money was flowing out to accounts I didn't recognize. I stayed up until 3 in the morning following every trail, and what I found made my blood run cold. The family business, the beautiful house everyone admired, even the cars we drove, everything was drowning in debt. 3 mortgages on the house, lines of credit, maxed out back taxes, vendor debts, equipment loans. The empire my husband bragged about at every party was actually a house of cards built on borrowed money and bad decisions like risky cryptocurrency bets and secret lifestyle expenses. We were hundreds of thousands of dollars underwater, and no one outside the books knew it. My first instinct was to confront him, but I knew my husband and the rest of the family too well. If I said anything, they would twist it, make me look crazy, and probably find a way to cut me out even faster. So instead, I protected myself the way my grandmother had taught me. I had my own separate retirement account from my early law firm years and the inheritance she left me when she passed. I worked with my old colleague Sarah Klein, a sharp retired accountant from the firm where I started to move everything into an irrevocable trust for Logan. My name wasn't even the beneficiary in a way that could be touched. Sarah helped me quietly document every single mortgage, every hidden transaction, and every suspicious transfer. We kept copies at her office and in a safe deposit box. Then I waited. 3 years of smiling at family dinners while knowing the truth. 3 years of watching my husband and my mother-in-law plan this exit strategy while I pretended to be the perfect supportive wife. Sarah would check in every few months with a quiet coffee and a nod that said she had my back. And then there was Marcus Reed Logan's school counselor, who started noticing how tense my son had become after the family started whispering about changes coming. Marcus never pushed, but he gave me gentle insights that helped me see how the poison was already spreading to Logan. Those two new allies became my silent anchors in a sea of family betrayal. After the anniversary party, the humiliation started fast, just like they had planned. My mother-in-law arrived the next morning with her perfectly practiced sympathy and started helping me pack. She decided which photos I could keep and which were family assets. Brooke Ellis, the 27-year-old who had been working at the company, showed up that same week with her yoga pants and designer bags, walking around the house like she already owned it. She even wore my grandmother's old apron while making smoothies in my kitchen. My best friend Megan Torres, the one I had cried to for weeks, kept calling with fake concern, but little things started slipping out that only my husband could have known. She had been feeding him information the whole time, hoping for her own chance once I was gone. Logan watched it all, and my heart broke every time he pulled away a little more. My husband was working on him daily, telling him how I was making everything difficult and how he just wanted everyone to be happy. Logan started asking questions I couldn't answer without revealing what I knew. Marcus Reed pulled me aside after one school meeting and said quietly, "He's confused, Elena. The family narrative is strong, but he's smart. Give him time." Sarah Klein texted me one night with a simple message: "The binders are ready whenever you are. Stay strong." Those small reminders kept me going through the worst weeks of my life. I hired Rachel Bennett, a no-nonsense divorce lawyer recommended by Sarah from her network. Rachel reviewed everything I had and leaned back in her chair with a slow smile. She understood the plan immediately. We would let them think they were winning. I would play the broken, defeated wife who asked for almost nothing in mediation. Meanwhile, the liability disclosure addendum would transfer every single debt onto my husband and the family business, once he signed for all the assets. The trap was already set, and they had no idea. The next few months were an acting masterclass. I showed up to every family gathering and mediation with red eyes and trembling hands. I spoke softly and asked for so little that even the mediator looked uncomfortable. My mother-in-law bragged at her book club that I hadn't fought for anything. Brooke started redecorating the house painting over the colors I had chosen years ago. Megan kept fishing for information, and I fed her exactly what they wanted to hear. Through it all, Logan noticed the disconnects: the new watch my husband bought while claiming money was tight, the shopping bags piling up while school trips were suddenly too expensive. One evening, he sat at my small temporary kitchen table and asked quietly, "Mom, is something really wrong with Dad's business?" I squeezed his hand and told him to trust me just a little longer. Marcus Reed had been right. My son was starting to see through the facade on his own. Behind the scenes, Rachel prepared the documents with surgical precision. The main agreement said I was relinquishing all claims to marital property. The attached addendum listed every mortgage, every loan, every obligation tied to those assets. When my husband signed, he would be taking it all lock, stock, and crushing debt. Sarah Klein had double-checked every number one last time and given me a quiet thumbs up. The night before the final hearing, my mother-in-law sent a text through Logan saying she hoped I would be gracious. I stared at the message for a long time and smiled to myself for the first time in months. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom in a simple navy dress, looking every bit the defeated woman they expected. My husband arrived in his best suit, new watch gleaming, Brooke waiting in the hallway. My mother-in-law sat in the gallery with that satisfied little smile. Rachel sat beside me, calm and ready. The Judge Margaret Klein reviewed the file and asked if I understood what I was signing away. I kept my voice soft and unsteady. Yes, Your Honor. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded and proceeded. As the documents were passed around and signatures were collected, I watched my husband sign eagerly without reading the fine print. David Langford, his lawyer, tried to whisper something urgent about the liability addendum, but my husband waved him off. He wanted this done. He wanted his new life with Brooke and the full control my mother-in-law had been pushing for. I signed slowly, deliberately, savoring every stroke of the pen. Across the table, my mother-in-law nodded approvingly at my husband. In the hallway, Brooke scrolled her phone, already planning her future in my house. Then David Langford reached the addendum. I watched his face change as he read the numbers. He leaned over and whispered urgently to my husband. The color drained from his face. The room suddenly felt electric with the first hints of the storm I had waited 3 years to unleash. My son Logan was waiting outside with Marcus Reed, who had offered to sit with him during the hearing. Sarah Klein had texted me earlier that morning with one simple line, "Today is the day the truth finally wins." I could feel the shift in the air as the realization started to sink in across the table. They had demanded everything, and I had given them exactly that. David Langford leaned in closer, his voice a frantic whisper that still carried across the hushed courtroom like a crack in glass. "Sir, the liability disclosure addendum is right here in black and white. You are personally assuming every mortgage, every line of credit, every vendor debt, and every lease obligation tied to the assets you just claimed. This is not a victory. This is a financial avalanche." My husband's face went the color of old paper. The expensive watch he had bought to celebrate his win caught the light as his hands started to tremble. He stared at the stack of documents like they had suddenly grown teeth. "This can't be right," he blurted out, voice rising. "She hid everything. This is fraud. Judge, you have to throw this out." Judge Margaret Klein set her pen down with deliberate calm and fixed him with the kind of look that had ended louder arguments than his. "Mr. Mercer, you signed the full agreement voluntarily. Your own counsel, Mr. Langford, here presented you with a waiver stating he strongly recommended a complete financial audit. You refused. The numbers were disclosed. The liabilities transfer with the assets. The agreement is final." My mother-in-law shot up from the gallery, her perfectly styled hair not moving an inch, while her voice cracked with outrage. "Your Honor, this is impossible. My son worked his entire life for that company. This woman can't just walk away and leave him holding the bag." She pointed straight at me, eyes blazing with the same practiced sympathy she had shown while packing my things in garbage bags months earlier. I kept my expression soft and defeated, exactly the mask I had worn for 3 years. Inside, something settled into place, quiet and final. Rachel Bennett, my lawyer, simply slid a single copy of the waiver across the table toward David Langford without a word. He took it, shoulders slumping, because he knew what it said, and he knew his client had ignored every warning. The gavel came down again. "Mrs. Harper, you have your settlement of $50,000 and your personal belongings. Mr. Mercer, you have the assets as agreed along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved." The words landed like stones in still water. My husband stayed frozen in his chair mouth, opening and closing with no sound. My mother-in-law clutched the back of the pew in front of her, whispering furiously to no one in particular. In the hallway beyond the double doors, I could see Brooke Ellis scrolling her phone, completely unaware that the life she thought she was stepping into had just evaporated. I stood slowly, smoothed my simple navy dress, and picked up my purse. Rachel gave me the smallest nod of respect I had ever seen from any attorney. As I walked past my husband's table, he finally found his voice again low and desperate. Elena, you knew. You sat there for 3 years, and you knew. I paused just long enough to meet his eyes. I was your bookkeeper for 11 years. I knew everything. You asked for everything except our son. I gave you exactly what you asked for. Outside in the bright April sunshine, my son was waiting on a bench with Marcus Reed, the school counselor, who had quietly become one of my quiet lifelines. Marcus stood as I approached, giving me a quick knowing look that said he had already pieced together more than most adults in that courtroom. My son looked up at me, those serious eyes, so much like his father's, but clearer now, less clouded by the stories he had been fed. Mom, what just happened in there? He asked, voice small but steady. Dad looked like he saw a ghost. I sat down beside him and took his hand the way I had when he was little. Something your father didn't read carefully enough, sweetheart. But you're safe. That's what matters. Marcus gave me another small nod and stepped away to give us space, but not before murmuring, he's been asking questions at school. The cracks are showing. The next 2 weeks moved faster than I expected. Brooke Ellis packed her designer bags in the middle of the night and left a note on the kitchen counter that simply read, "This isn't what I signed up for." The gray paint she had slapped over my carefully chosen sage green walls stared back empty and cold. My mother-in-law tried calling me 3 times, then switched to texting my son with messages like, "Tell your mother this is all a misunderstanding and we need to talk as a family." My son read them out loud to me one evening in my small new apartment, and then quietly blocked her number himself. Sarah Klein. My retired accountant friend who had guarded my binders like treasure for 3 years met me for coffee the following Monday. She slid a fresh printout across the table showing the first default notices on the house. "Creditors move fast when they smell blood," she said with a wry smile. "The second mortgage payment was missed 2 days ago. The business line of credit is frozen. Your husband is already getting calls from vendors who haven't been paid in months." She didn't gloat. She didn't have to. We both knew the numbers. Megan Torres, the friend I had once trusted with everything, tried one last time to reach out. Her voicemail was all sugar and fake concern. "Elena, I heard things went sideways at the hearing. I'm so sorry. Let's grab wine and talk." I deleted it without answering. Some betrayals don't deserve a reply, and I was done giving pieces of myself to people who had already sold them. But the sharpest cut came from my son. One night he sat at our tiny kitchen table staring at his phone where his father had sent yet another message, begging him to come stay at the house while things get sorted. My son looked up at me, voice cracking just a little. "Mom, he keeps saying you tricked him, that you planned this whole thing. Is any of that true?" I took a slow breath the same way I had practiced for 3 years. "I protected us. That's all. He asked for everything except you, and I made sure you would always be taken care of no matter what. I didn't tell him about the irrevocable trust yet. That would come when he was ready. Right now, he needed to see that I wasn't the villain in this story." He was quiet for a long minute, then pushed his chair back. "I think I need some air." He walked out the door without slamming it, but the soft click still echoed louder than any shout. Marcus Reed texted me later that night. "He's processing. Give him space, but he's asking the right questions now. Proud of you, Elena. The business started hemorrhaging publicly within a month. Suppliers filed small claims. The big house went up for sale, but sat there with 3 mortgages hanging over it like storm clouds. My mother-in-law's book club friends stopped inviting her for brunch once the rumors spread. She tried one final play, showing up at my apartment unannounced with a casserole and a tight smile. "We're still family," she said, voice sweet as spoiled milk. "Your husband is struggling. Logan needs his father. Don't you think it's time to be reasonable?" I stood in the doorway blocking her path the way she had once blocked mine from my own closet. Reasonable is what I was for 15 years. He got exactly what he demanded. Now we're all living with it. She left the casserole on the mat and never came back. My husband tried once more too. He showed up at my door on a rainy Thursday evening looking nothing like the confident man who had toasted his freedom at his mother's anniversary party. Suit rumpled, eyes hollow. "Elena, please. I made mistakes, but we can figure this out. For our son, at least." I leaned against the door frame and looked at the man I had once loved enough to build an entire life around. "You asked for everything except our son. You got exactly what you wanted. Good night." He stood in the hallway for a long time after I closed the door. I watched through the peephole while I ate ice cream straight from the carton, the same way I had promised myself I would the day this moment finally arrived. It tasted better than I had imagined, but the real cost was starting to show in my son's eyes. He still came home every night, still hugged me before bed, but something had shifted. The trust we had rebuilt was fragile, and I knew the next conversation we needed to have about the trust fund and everything I had hidden for 3 years would either bring us closer or push him away for good. Sarah had warned me it might feel like losing a piece of him, even while saving him. Marcus kept saying teenagers process betrayal on their own timeline. I was about to find out just how steep that price would be when my son walked in the next evening holding a printed bank statement he wasn't supposed to have seen yet, and asked the one question I had dreaded since the very beginning. "Mom, why is there $500,000 in a trust with my name on it that Dad can never touch?" The room suddenly felt smaller, and I realized the final reckoning wasn't over yet. My name is Elena Harper. I am 39 years old. When my husband stood up during his mother's milestone anniversary toast and calmly declared he was ending our 15-year marriage while claiming every asset we had built together, the betrayal hit me like a physical blow, leaving me struggling to breathe amid the stunned family silence. He announced the divorce and that the house, cars, and business would remain his. My mother-in-law nodded in agreement as my son stared in shock. I didn't cry or argue. Instead, I slowly stood, smiled politely, and excused myself to the powder room with quiet dignity. But that walk away was the moment I decided their underestimation would become their undoing. If you've ever felt your own family erase you right in front of everyone who matters, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read every single one. And it really means the world to know I'm not alone in this. I sat down slowly at our small kitchen table, the sage green walls I had painted myself suddenly feeling too bright under the overhead light. My son Logan held the printed bank statement like it might burn his fingers, his 15-year-old face twisted with the kind of hurt that only comes when the person you trust most has been hiding something huge. "Mom, why is there $500,000 in a trust with my name on it that Dad can never touch?" His voice cracked on the last word, and the room felt smaller than ever, like the walls were closing in on the secret I had carried alone for 3 years. I took a slow breath and met his eyes, the same serious eyes that used to look at me like I hung the moon. "Logan, that money came from my grandmother. It's been protected in an irrevocable trust since before the divorce started. Your father never knew because I kept it completely separate, just like my grandmother taught me. I did it to make sure you had a future no matter how bad things got with the business or the house or everything else. I wasn't trying to hide it from you forever. I was waiting until you were ready." He dropped the paper on the table and pushed his chair back, the scrape of wood on tile sharper than any courtroom gavel. 3 years. Mom, you let Dad call you weak, and let Grandma pack your stuff in garbage bags, and let Brooke paint over everything like you were already gone, and the whole time you knew the business was sinking, you let me think we were losing it all. I defended you to Dad when he said you were making things difficult. I felt sorry for you, and now I find out you were playing chess while I was just scared. The words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away, not angry exactly, just distant in a way that told me this wound might never fully close. That was the part no one warns you about when you choose to protect your child the hard way. Sometimes the protection itself becomes the crack that never quite seals. I know it feels like I didn't trust you, I said quietly, my voice steady even though my chest ached. But your father and his mother were already turning you against me. If I had told you then, it would have put you right in the middle, and I couldn't risk that. The trust is yours for college, for a first apartment, for anything you need. It's safe. We're safe. Logan stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet suburban street in Naperville, where our new life was supposed to feel like a fresh start. I get why you did it. I do. But it still feels like you were lying to me the whole time, like I was just another piece in the plan. He didn't yell. He didn't slam anything. He just sounded tired, and that quiet exhaustion hurt worse than shouting ever could. Marcus Reed, his school counselor, who had become a steady presence through all of this, had warned me that teenagers process betrayal on their own timeline. Tonight, that timeline felt endless. The next morning, Logan left for school without the usual hug, and I sat at the same table with my coffee going cold, knowing I had won the war, but lost something irreplaceable in the peace treaty. My husband's empire continued its rapid collapse in the background, like a slow-motion car crash I had already walked away from. Vendors filed lawsuits. The house sat unsold with its 3 mortgages choking it, and the business line of credit was frozen solid. Sarah Klein, the retired accountant who had guarded my binders and my sanity for 3 years, called me with updates that felt almost merciful in their finality. The bankruptcy filing came through yesterday, she said over the phone, her voice calm but edged with the same dry wit that had kept me going. Your husband is learning the hard way that assets without cash flow are just pretty paperweights. My mother-in-law tried one last desperate approach a week later, showing up at my apartment door with a foil-covered dish and the same tight smile she had worn while deciding which of my family photos were marital assets. Elena, we're still family, she said, pushing the casserole toward me like it could erase months of garbage bag packing and public humiliation. Your husband is struggling. Logan needs his father. Don't you think it's time to be the bigger person and help sort this out? The words were sugar-coated poison, the same tone she had used at the anniversary party when she nodded along to my husband's announcement like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I blocked the doorway the way she had once blocked me from my own closet and looked her straight in the eye. Bigger person is what I was for 15 years while I kept the books and raised his son and watched him dig the hole deeper. He demanded everything except Logan. He got exactly what he asked for. Now we're all living with the consequences. She left the dish on the mat and never came back, her perfect hair still unmoving, even as her world shrank around her. Brooke Ellis was long gone by then, of course. The note she left on the kitchen counter the night she packed her yoga pants and designer bags had been short and to the point. This isn't what I signed up for. Megan Torres, the friend who had spent 20 years pretending to have my back while feeding information to my husband, tried one final voicemail that I deleted without listening. Some bridges burn so completely that even the ashes aren't worth saving. Rachel Bennett. My sharp divorce lawyer met me for a celebratory lunch 2 months after the hearing. She raised her glass with that same slow, dangerous smile she had given me when she first saw my binders. You walked into that courtroom looking like a woman who had nothing left, and you walked out with everything that actually mattered. Most clients want revenge that's loud and public. Yours was quiet, legal, and devastating. I've never been prouder to lose a case on paper and win it in real life. We laughed, but the sound felt a little hollow knowing the cost at home. My husband showed up one last time on a rainy Thursday evening, looking nothing like the man who had toasted his new freedom at his mother's anniversary party. Suit-rumpled eyes hollow, the expensive watch long gone. He stood in my doorway and said the words I had half expected for months. I made mistakes, I know that now. But we can figure something out for Logan's sake, right? Please, Elena. I leaned against the frame and studied the man I had once loved enough to build an empire with. You asked for everything except our son. You got exactly what you wanted. Good night. He lingered in the hallway for a long time after the door clicked shut. I watched through the peephole while I ate ice cream straight from the carton, the same small ritual I had promised myself on the day I decided to wait 3 years. It tasted like freedom, but the sweetness was tinged with the knowledge that my son was still processing the trust discovery in his room down the hall. The distance between us growing one quiet day at a time. I enrolled in interior design courses at the local community college, using part of the modest settlement, finally chasing the dream I had set aside at 23, when my husband asked me to quit and help build his. My first client was a woman named Sandra, who had just left a 30-year marriage and stood in her empty apartment looking lost. "How do you start over?" she asked, voice trembling. I thought about Logan's stiff hug and my mother-in-law's final casserole and answered honestly. One room at a time, one color at a time, one honest conversation at a time. Even when it costs more than you planned. We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried happy tears, and for the first time in months, I let myself feel a flicker of pride that wasn't mixed with guilt. Logan still lives with me. He still eats dinner at the same table and tells me about school, but the easy trust we once had is gone, replaced by a careful politeness that reminds me every single day of the irreversible loss that came with my victory. Marcus Reed checks in regularly and tells me teenagers heal in their own time. Sarah Klein sends encouraging texts with spreadsheets showing the trust growing steadily. I have security, freedom, and a future I built with my own quiet patience. But I no longer have the version of my son who believed I could do no wrong, and that missing piece is the price I will carry forever. Some reckonings don't end with fireworks and perfect closure. They end with a smaller apartment, a sage green kitchen, and the quiet knowledge that choosing yourself sometimes means losing pieces of the people you saved. I wouldn't change a single decision, but I would give anything to hear my son laugh at my bad jokes the way he used to before he learned his mother had been 3 steps ahead the whole time. Thank you for listening to my story. If my experience taught you anything about protecting yourself when your own family turns on you, drop a comment below. Would you have waited 3 years like I did, knowing the cost might be your child's full trust? I read every single one.